What's up, YouTube? Here with the boys, Benjamin and Charlie. We're both a bit under the weather. There's been a bug going around, and currently they, as well as my wife, have it. So the holidays have been a bit rough. Before we jump into this most recent video, I wanted to give a heads up that the Solve for Why Trading Academy website has a first free month on their site using the code S4YGIFT. It's good for the next couple of days, so if you're watching this video in 2020, unfortunately it's too late, but it is a $100 value. I think it's highly educational as well as entertaining, which is really important in my opinion. Even if you don't necessarily agree with their thought processes, I think it gives a lot of insight into what good winning pros are thinking about during hands. So anyway, yeah, check that out, and let me know what you think down below. And if it's not something that interests you, then you can cancel it within the first month, and it'll all be free. Anyway, let's get into this current video. Say bye-bye, boys.
Bye.
What's up, YouTube? In an attempt to keep the ball rolling and, keep the vlog up to date, we're going to go over today's session with one that I wasn't really planning on discussing, mostly because it started off as PLO, and I don't know, PLO could be a little bit difficult to keep track of, especially we were shorthanded for a period of time to get everything written down. So I decided I wouldn't be writing about it, but I ended up playing kind of a substantial session thereafter. So I have a couple things to discuss, so let's jump off. To begin with, the PLO, it was 235 PLO. It's usually what goes on Wednesdays. It's usually the reason I go in on Wednesdays if I do go. And, the game's usually pretty good. Unfortunately, this time we kind of really couldn't get anything going. I think at max we were six-handed. And it was with a couple of guys who are, regs, not terrible, understand the game. We all kind of understand how each other play. So not much was going on. And I decided to really mix it up. I was raising a lot of pots, getting in there, just playing way too loose, and got clipped for it. I don't even remember a lot of the hands. It was just a bunch of spots, making second best, because that's what's going to happen when you play bad hands. There were a couple situations where I'd call like a 4-bet with some like double suited, gapped, baby hand to crack aces because I knew it was aces, and then you call 250 a couple of times, and that adds up pretty quick. Then I did play a hand in which I raised, I think, Jack 9-9-7 one suit, obviously trash, but we're four-handed. Get a call, two calls from the blinds. Flop comes 10-8-6, not trash anymore. We flopped the nuts with a backdoor flush draw, and obviously still a straight draw to the bigger nuts. It goes check to me. I put in a bet, I think of 2/3 pot. Small blind folds, and now the big blind with the straddle hood called. He just makes it to like 200, which he can't do. And I just know at this point, obviously, he's got like a big hand when he does this, whether it be two pair, set, something like that, just something he's not folding. He's playing like 400. Obviously, he can't make it 200, but I'm not going to try to prevent him or whatever. I just quickly kind of put in the 400 to get the money in. He calls. It didn't used to be that you could run it twice in these games, but now they've kind of created the option for the smaller PLO to run it twice. This guy, when he sat down, says he doesn't want to run it twice. So now he brings up, he's like, "Oh, do you want to run it twice?" And I'm like, I kind of actually assumed that with given how quickly he put it in, that's possible we just have the same hand. So he's sort of like, "Well, do you want to run it twice?" And I'm like, "Well, you said you didn't want to run it twice." And then he kind of like stutters, and I'm just like, "All right, just run it once." So again, flop is 10-8-6. I have Jack 9-9-7, so I flop the nuts with the open ender to the bigger straight. Turns a brick, rivers an 8, and he's like, "Is it a high hand?" And he tables 8-8 for just middle set, making rivered quads. That pot, I think, was like $800 something. I lose like 4 something in the hand, but anyway. So obviously, if I win that hand, I probably don't have the wheels come off a bit more than after that. But then we really start opening it up a bit. I ended up losing, or got myself stuck about 1,500 when that guy decides he doesn't want to play shorthanded. It's now me and the other two guys, and I'm just like, you know what, this isn't the spot. I know I'm playing too loose. I'm going to get clipped off here. You can just kind of tell I'm the wounded bird in this situation. There is a 5, 10, 20 no limit running, and, how do you get unstuck? You just jump into the bigger game. So off to the bigger game we went. I jumped in 5, 10, 20. I think I sat in with 1,500 or 2K. Then I added on once I lost a little bit. So I was in for 2,500 in that game. Stuck 1,500 for the other. So in for 4K total for the day. Not much to note in the beginning, just kind of seesawed back and forth a little bit. Then there was a kid who sits down who actually introduced himself when I was playing PLO, saying that he watches the vlog. So shout out to you, Eric. It was really nice meeting you. It was fun. I ended up playing with him for the majority of the night. Really cool dude. So shout out to you. And anyway, it folds to him on the button. He opens the 70. I'm immediately thinking, I think he actually 3-bet me a couple of times before that, or maybe it was after that. I don't remember exactly anymore. But I was thinking to myself, I'm like, oh, this would be a nice spot to just pick up aces, because I feel like, he's going to think I'm full of it. And I just looked down and I have aces. It was just really kind of weird, serendipitous, I suppose, because I was actually thinking about it. Anyway, so my initial reaction was like, oh, should I just flat here, keep ranges wide? But yeah, I mean, obviously I have aces. I want to build a pot. He's playing, I think, about 12 or 1300, something like that. I don't remember exactly anymore. So I make it 240. He calls. Flop comes king 10. I think like king 10 deuce. Pretty dry. I figure in this situation, when I have aces, he really can't continue unless he has like ace king. And obviously I block that pretty heavily. And there's not much I'm scared of, really. With having pocket aces in my hand, I block his combos of having like ace queen, ace jack for the gut shots to the nuts. And I decided to be a little cagey, checking, kind of trying to give him a little bit of rope, make it look like maybe I have queens or jacks myself. He checks back, which I expect him to do a lot. The turn is another brick. I think it's a 3. So it's like king 10 deuce, turn 3. And I decided to check again, trying to really make it sell the idea that I have like queens or jacks, maybe ace jack, ace queen. And he checks it back. At this point, it's like, I feel like he's probably got a pair that's trying to get to showdown, is the most likely situation, maybe like 9s, 8s, something like that. The river pairs the board. I think it's a 3 or a deuce. And now we would need to go for value. I think if I bet too small, it's going to look like I have a hand like queens or jacks. So I size up a little bit. I make it 330. Maybe I can go even a little bit larger. He ends up calling, and obviously aces are good. He ends up telling me afterwards, once we this game broke, we jumped back into the 3-5, which ended up being a 3-5-10 no limit game. He said he called me really light. And I was like, what, like something like 6s? And I might have nailed it exactly, because he like nodded his head. Maybe it was like 6s, 7s, something like that. Which, I don't blame him. As played, I could be pretty wide here. And like, what value hands do I have here? Probably just exactly like queens or jacks as played. So we win that one. The one action player in the game ends up going bust. Another guy like decides to quit. I think at this point we're like 4 or 5 handed, and I could just immediately feel this is pretty much the end of the game, right? Like you kind of get the pulse of the game when you've been playing long enough to know like the game is fragile and this is probably the end of it. It folds to me in the big blind. There's a straddle to my left. It's a guy who's actually been checking back. So we've been playing, I think, 4 or 5-handed for a little bit, and there's been a number of folds to us, and I've been completing my big blind, and he's been checking back his straddle. So it feels like he's not really attacking, not trying to take advantage of me. I look down at Jack 4 of hearts. Obviously not a very good hand, but I figure I'm going to attack his straddle and open the 70. He calls. I expect him to call fairly wide. We are playing like 4-handed at this point. The flop ends up coming king 10, I think king 10 like brick, maybe king 10 deuce, king 10 6, something like that. Obviously very similar to the previous hand as it sounds, but it is like king 10 undercard, not an 8, I don't think, like king 10 7, maybe something like that. I'm obviously just gonna be c-betting here. I want to size up because I'm trying to get rid of so a lot of his like maybe pocket pair of 7-6s that he's defending on this exact board. Maybe it's a bad idea to be sizing up because a lot of the hands he's going to be defending are going to be hands that have gut shots, pairs that are just not going to be folding, right? 10 jack, queen jack, jack 9, ace jack, just all hands that are going to be either a pair or a gutter that I don't expect to fold. So I might as well, I think, just be betting smaller on flop and sizing up on turn if I do pick up equity. Anyway, he calls, and we drill the just nut turn card. It's the queen of hearts. So I pick up open ender and the flush draw. Obviously, I'm going to be double barreling. This is my ideal double barrel card. I was probably going to just be one and done in this situation. Otherwise, I expect it to be fairly sticky. and continue. I guess it depends on like what the turn was. Maybe if the turn was like a deuce or a 3, maybe I would have tried to got like sized up for a big double barrel. Anyway, I bet 240, and he calls fairly quickly. So now we're off to the races, praying that we hit the card. It feels to me a lot like he's gonna have some hands like maybe King Jack, King 9, Queen Jack, Queen 9, pairs and gut shots. Mostly is what I'm putting him on. So anyway, the river is a 9, giving us a straight, pretty much the nuts, right? The only hand I'm losing to Ace Jack, and Ace Jack would have been the nuts on the turn. If he has that, kudos to him. He's going to stack me anyway. And now the question is, what to bet? This is obviously a great range card for him. If I bet too big, it's just going to be impossible to really get calls from worse hands. Obviously, at this point, the pot is, I believe, around $800. I haven't done the exact math, but somewhere right around there. And I decide I want to size down for 2 reasons. We're trying to get a light call from the 2 pairs, and more importantly, I just get the feeling that this guy is going to pounce if he thinks I'm weak. Like if I'm betting like some 2 pairs here for value, like King 10, Ace King, things like that. So I bet 310, and to our not so much surprise, we get the happy news. He makes it 1110, 800 more. I don't think there's any reason to jam here. He's got like another 700. We're just not getting called by worse in this spot where I go bet and then jam. So I snap him off, and he tables Ace 10. I'm kind of surprised he continued on turn. I guess he does have the gut shot, but I don't think he's ahead of much on turn, generally speaking. Obviously, in this case, he was. But I don't know. Maybe he had a read on me. I don't really know. Anyway, we got lucky, and fairly nice for us that he does raise this river as a bluff. So we win that pot, which gets us, I think, like all the way unstuck, plus a little bit. And he snapped, like rage quits. Can't blame him, really. Like I said, I expected the game was going to break anyway. And I obviously he's not very happy there that I sucked out. And then he decides to bluff raise that river. So he quits. The other player, I think at that point, it leaves us 3-handed. Another guy's like he's quitting as well. And that left me and Eric. And I wasn't going to be playing him heads up because he seemed like the only competent player really in the casino at this point. So we both decided to head over to 3-5. There was one hand where there is an open to 25. We're playing 3-5-10 from this one kid who I've played with before. I know he's a bit of a spaz. I know he's opening wide. I look down at Ace 10 of diamonds on the button. I make it 70 to isolate, and just because we were going multi-way repeatedly, so I don't really want to necessarily be playing this hand like 4 or 5 ways. There was some squeezing going on. I don't think I'm going to be able to defend versus a squeeze. So I make it 70, trying to isolate him specifically. He calls. The flop comes 9-8-6. We flop ourselves a gut shot and a backdoor flush draw. This board is just going to be significantly better for him than it is for me. So when he checks, I decided to check it back. It's going to be a bit hard, obviously, to play this out. But I think he's going to have a fair amount of hands like Queen Jack, King Jack, just a Broadway paint cards that he's going to be opening. So I do expect that if he bets his turn, I'm going to be calling if it is some brick. The turn, I think, is a 4. He checks. At this point, I check it back, trying to get the showdown as cheap as possible. The river, I think, is a 3 now. So it's 9-8-6-4-3. And now he bets 60. It looks like a value bet, but it feels to me, I don't know, I just kind of get this read that it's like a value bluff. It's, supposed to be disguised as a value bet. But I do expect that he's going to have some Queen Jack, King 10, just the Broadway holdings that are air here that can bluff for cheap. He doesn't need to be betting large to bluff, right? Like, it looks like I have exactly Ace King, so what's the point in betting $100? So I am getting a good price here. I don't have to be correct very often. I call, and, what do we think? We're getting shown the good news? Comment down below. Let me know. Do you think Ace 10 high is any good here? Anyway, he tables the King 7 off for flopping, open-ended, and then bricking. So lucky us. Obviously, he had a ton of outs. But he didn't get there, and we scooped that one. There was one really funny hand that I was not involved in myself that I want to kind of discuss for one quick reason. There is an open, I think, to like 25 or 30. Eric 3-bets pre-flop. I don't remember the exact sizing. I think he 3-bets to 150. Maybe there's an open to 40. He 3-bets to 150. The small blind cold calls. He's a reg that I've played with a lot. I've discussed him in some other hands. Anyway, he calls, and the opener calls as well. They go 3 ways to a flop, which I believe comes Jack, Jack 7, goes check, check. Eric C-bets 150, 1/3 pot. Seems pretty standard, especially on a board like Jack, Jack 7. The small blind calls, which looks a lot like pairs, maybe like 10s, 9s. And now, I actually wasn't paying attention to the hand, but this was relayed to me later. The player who originally opened, and who is a guy known as, he's just known for kind of being quiet, sleeping at the table, not paying attention to hands. And he decides to perk up and says something like, "Oh, well, that's really strong. You have a hand? You have a pair?" Then he calls, turns a brick, goes check. Now, this guy who's kind of giving a speech on the turn leads for 150, and he goes fold, fold. He goes, "Is it high hand?" Dealer confirms, yes, it is. And he tables Jack, Jack for quads. It's really poorly played. There's really no reason for two things: to give a speech on the flop. Just don't do it. Just be quiet. These things, they give themselves away. Both the players in the hand say they recognize it. He made even a comment on the hand. If they really folded something like queens or tens, that's a pretty good fold, especially getting that price. So I don't know what either of them have. They both claim to have had pairs. But yeah, first of all, there's no reason to lead this turn. Sure, it's going to go checks through quite often. But that being said, you want to give them the potential to, I think, suck out. They're not very deep. The pot's huge. I think he only had 500 or 600 left. The pot at this point is 900. So there's just no point in betting. Even if it checks through on the river, now if the small blind checks, you could just bet and possibly get looked up by a hand like queens, tens, kings, whatever. Anyway, so they both fold, and yeah, so just don't give speeches. Most people can really see through it. Whenever you do anything that's kind of just awkward and weird, people nowadays really see through it. Start doing it as a bluff, I guess, if that's your thing. And I think that's about it. We kind of seesawed back and forth, went from maybe stuck 300 to even to stuck 300. Ended up losing, I think, 200 in that game for a total of a net winner on the day of $20, I think, between all of the action that occurred. So yeah, obviously very lucky to have that Jack 4 of hearts return in our favor. And note to self, don't be a sweetheart in PLO, especially shorthanded. People are just going to pick you off. They're just going to fold a ton when they don't have it. You're going to pick up these small pots, and then they're going to just rifle you off when you're spazzing off. So anyway, that's all for now. Thanks for checking out the vlog again. And we're going to have to keep this rolling.